let's move on to the second session for today. Stop sharing. So we saw ways of containerizing a pipeline in the past hour. The next topic is a bit different. It's about graphical applications, and I always make room for this type of topic with your type of audience in bioinformatics and so on, because I believe there's always a good number of people that need to run applications with a graphical front end. It can be RStudio, can be Jupyter, but also other types of applications. Some of them use web interfaces, so you need to open up a browser page and to interact with the GUI of the application. Other ones use Windows systems, so they open up Windows in your desktop. And we're going to cover both of these cases today. So that's it. Yeah, basically, we're going to cover an RStudio example, which is actually something you already saw in the webinar. But my thinking was, okay, let's go through setting up an RStudio server again, but taking now more time to get it set up. So hopefully in that way, we'll have a better appreciation on what the critical points can be in getting a graphical application up and running. And I mean, what is the difference compared to a graphical one? The thing is that you have things you need to care of that you normally don't have for command line applications. In the case of RStudio and Jupyter, a big thing is that you are running the client in a way that is accessible via web browser. And so, for instance, you need to set up appropriate authentication methods. You can't just leave a web page without password access so that anyone, any hacker in the world can just pop in your machine and do whatever they want. So this is a good example of why there is a bit of extra machinery when setting up a graphical application in containers. Another aspect is the fact that a lot of these applications need to write configuration files in the home of your computer. And you would normally not notice when you are running the application without containers, but when you use containers, and especially Singularity, that becomes an issue, because you might remember that Singularity containers are read-only. So if an application from the container tries and write whatever in any location, including the home, you will get an error. So you need to also expand the setup of your container runtime to accommodate this need. And we're going to see that both in the case of RStudio and of other applications. So I'm going to start with the RStudio example now. And then you're going to continue that in the breakout room. If time in the breakout rooms allow, there is also a Jupyter example that you can run through. If there's no time, it's not a big deal. It will remain there. You can have a look at that later on. And then the third example you're going to see is that of a Windows application. And I believe this is relevant to many people. And I just heard, I just saw some question in the discussion board about that. So I think it's quite in context. You've seen the graphical, so the web browser-based graphical applications, the example of RStudio, and there's also a Jupyter example there for you, for those that prefer the type of clients to run their pipelines. Now I'm going to move and show you an example of a Windows application that can be run from a container. There are some good cases out there. The one I always mention, which is actually the one I'm going to run here, is IGV, the Genome Viewer from Broad Institute. But there are quite a good number of other bioinformatics applications that use Windows to show graphical content. So when using X11 Windows with containers, there is a small number of requirements that we need to take into account. Some of them actually hold for any other Windows application that was originally developed for Linux and you need to run in other machines. So the first requirement is actually to have a Windows system that is compatible with that application installed in your machine. And because a lot of these applications are developed for Linux, the most common window framework, window system is called X window system or X11. And that's why that was basically the requirements for today. So Linux systems are good to go. They ship that natively. For Mac, you need to install Xquartz, that is the X11 declination for Mac. For Windows, you have a couple of options. There is SigWinX that just gives you the X11 features for Windows boxes. But then if you're using MobXterm for a remote connection, MobXterm already ships with X11 facilities. Of course, so you might be running this application in containers from your local laptop or machine, but if you're running that remotely as we're doing today, you will need an X11 setup on the remote server as well. That is normally not a big deal. This is point 2, right, in this list. This is normally not a big deal because most workstations and compute servers are Linux anyway, so they all already ship with X11. And then there is a third bit that actually is the one that can gives you trouble. So even if you have an X client in your machine, you have X11 set up remotely, you still need to get these two guys communicate and exchange information for the Windows to open properly. So this is what we call X11 forwarding. That's why I asked you to add the -X or -Y flag when you SSH into the Nimbus VM. MobXterm users might need a slightly different setup. It can also be set up in a settings window. And there are also other ways of getting that up and running with SSH tunnels. The thing, sometimes there are firewalls that can end up in unintended, unpredictable behaviors, and they can screw what you're trying to do, especially when it comes to training settings where time is kind of gold. But in principle, this is what you need, okay? X client on your machine, X server on the other end, and X11 forwarding between the two machines. And then there's a small requirement in the container you're using to run the X11 enabled application. And the requirement is to have a specific package installed in the container. So this is a snippet from a Docker file for a container. The package is called Xauth. So if you're using a Ubuntu or Debian for your container, you need to apt-get install Xauth. If you're using CentOS or other Linux flavors, the syntax will be slightly different, but the key thing is that you need this Xauth package installed in the container. Actually, to be completely honest, you need this not really for Singularity containers. You need this if you ever happen to run the application from a Docker, using Docker as the runtime. And so you still want to have it there just for compatibility with any container engine. So this is kind of a weak requirement. And then there is a very last thing that you need with any X11 applications. Otherwise, the setup won't work, and I will show you an example in the hands-on. You need to bind mount a very specific file when you launch the container. The file is called xauthority, actually .xauthority. It's in the home of your remote Linux box. And it's basically an authorization cookie. It's a magic key that is required for the communication between your local client and the remote server to happen properly. If you don't use that, the Windows won't open. So the setup won't work. So let's give it a go. And as I said, we're going to use an IGV container, the Genome Viewer by Broad Institute. I've created a custom container just to embed this Xauth package that I was mentioning before. So let's pull it. I will just hold on with me just a second. I'm just logging back in to be sure everything is fine here. So let's go back to data containers and then exercises graphical, right? Let's pull this IGV container here. As the other ones, it's pre-cached in the VM, so it shouldn't be too long. Okay. And now let's give it a go. So Singularity exec IGV, and I believe now I can't remember, it should be IGV. Oh, all right. So we're getting some problems here. And if you go back, the main deal is this one: failed to create user directory. And this is something you kind of also saw with in the RStudio example. It's a common thing with graphical applications. Basically, IGV needs to write little config files in your home, but the Singularity containers are read-only, so you need to bind mount a fake home in the container for things to run. And that's why in the directory I'm running from, and if you still have your session open, I encourage you to give it a go as well. You need to bind mount any directory. In this case, I prepared this home IGV for the purpose, and make it and call it $home inside the container, and that will basically fix the home problem. And then there is still a second problem, which is this one: no X11 display variable was set. And this second problem, I actually already mentioned the solution in when I was scrolling in the materials. The second problem can be healed by mounting that authority file that I was mentioning before. So that happens because the client in your computer for the X11 system can't talk to the server because there is an authorization required, and the authorization cookie is in this file. And this syntax is general for any X11 application. So you get the trick once, and then you're good to go. I will just mention a small variation that you might need some time. And today we are poised with issues. So now this is unexpected. Now this should have worked. So
what are you thinking through?
Okay, now that's yeah, that's expected. That's unexpected, honestly. This should have worked. I just double check quickly in the materials, but yeah, I haven't missed anything, so it's a bit weird. Oh yes, yes. So no, I know what happened. So that's exactly what I had told at the beginning. So the latest Mac installation is unfriendly in this regard. Every time you update it, the local X11 client breaks, and you need to reinstall it again. And this is, I think, automatic updates rolled out by my company a couple of days ago, and they just this just lit under my control, and I didn't notice that. So yes, I'm sorry, I can't go ahead with this right now. I will maybe aim to have it ready for tomorrow morning, so I can quickly show you this example. We're basically done with it. So what should have happened is that a nice window should have popped out on my main desktop with the IGV browser. Yeah, I find this new Mac handling of X11 a bit disappointing because yeah, you have to remember to reinstall it basically after every update. All right, so I think with this nice and expected from our live session, I have concluded the graphical applications part. So we have a kind of 15 minutes left in today's workshop, and I think it's a good time to maybe get some questions out from either the discussion board or any other sources. So maybe Anne, you spotted something.
Well, that's interesting. It seems like some of them are working. So yours didn't work, but some of them are working.
Yeah, that's I'm not surprised because, as I said, it's but yeah, it's nice. So someone got it working. So is anyone keen on maybe sharing the screen? That might be a nice way of using the Zoom features, right? So I see Nick Wong had it working, and just picking up one of the last names in the chat. So if you're fine with that, Nick, you can share your screen with the green button. If you don't want,
Yep.
if you can't, that's fine.
No, that's fine.
No problem.
Yep. Hold on, we share.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So
I
if
think you can see.
And you launched that from with the same syntax, right? So you can go now in the tools menu of IGV, because I prepared a small example to run just so that we can see something. Actually, it's Sarah Beecroft, one of the facilitators, who actually prepared this example for me. So run batch script. So in tools, it will be and then it's batch.igv, and then you just click on open. It should take just a few seconds. It will load a genome, and now I'm out of my confidence zone. It's Sarah. Help, Sarah, are you there?
Hey, yeah. So this is showing reads from whole genome sequencing for an intron in RFC1. So Marco has soft clipping enabled. So what you can see with all the little vertical stripes is where the reads aren't fully matching to the reference genome, which is at the bottom. And this is actually a disease locus. So I supplied it because I thought it was really interesting. This individual is carrying that's a cool highlight thing. This individual is carrying repeat expansion disease. And yeah, so you can actually see it here in their sequencing.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so and the key, then we got to see something cool from a genome today with IGV, and the most important thing, we did that to a container, so we didn't have to install the application ourselves. We just identified the good setup for runtime with that couple of flags that we need to run. We needed to add, to the Singularity Xtech command line. And then that's it. We could run IGV from a container. We were running it remotely from a virtual machine on Nimbus. And thanks to a an appropriate X11 setup, which wasn't the case on my machine, we could even visualize the IGV window on a local computer. And thanks, Nick, for sharing the screen with us, that example. Yeah.
Okay, so Alexandra, I think there was a question from the first breakout. There was some odd behavior, and it was in the chat, and it's also in the Google Doc. I'm wondering if that odd behavior was figured out.
Not sure. I mean, it wasn't something that prevented us from working with it, but yeah, that was very strange. So just to summarize, one of us didn't have to, in the first example, didn't have to actually prepend the path to the summon container with .data, even though everything we checked, everything was exactly like in the tutorial, whilst I was actually getting, if I didn't prepend that, I was getting an error. So it was just weird.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, Marco?
Any more details to add on this issue?
Not like we were trying to figure out ourselves, and it was just weird because it's It's
I saw that on the chat as well. Yeah, it's I don't know, because if you use the content, the images that we pulled together, it should have just worked. I normally use. I saw there was that SH error. I normally use bash for inspecting the container, and that was present in those images. But yeah, maybe if you have the history of the commands or something, or you can provide me with that, we can have a look. And then it can be interesting to follow up tomorrow in the last session or on Thursday at some point. Thanks.
Okay, great. Any other comments coming out of the breakout rooms from any of the facilitators from either the first or second breakout room that you wanted to share? Anything unexpected?
I had an unusual issue trying to pass Singularity env environment variables into the container for RStudio. It just wasn't working for me. I don't know why. I was able to set username and password by passing environment variables in by other ways, like running Singularity shell and setting them manually, or doing a bash wrapper. But yeah, it wasn't picking up the Singularity _env stuff that I was exporting.
It's Singularity env underscore?
Yes.
Okay, so without, so the underscore is after env?
Yes, yeah.
And then there is the name of the variable, and you need to export it. Okay.
Yeah, it was just not.
Yeah.
I think that's a known issue with RStudio. If you look on their GitHub, there's a bunch of issues related to that. Yeah.
Yeah, still, I mean, the setup that I outlined in the exercise is well tested. I mean, it's and I've tested it several times on this same VM, so it's interesting.
So I did then find that if I got a clean shell and used the -e flag for clean env, then I got it working.
Okay.
So it was something fishy. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Any other challenges or interesting points or anything anyone wants to share?
Yeah, on this, maybe one comment, and then I will try and be short to leave time for other people. The main takeaway for these graphical applications is that often, so you already find a lot of images out there with RStudio, Jupyter ready to go. The devil is in the details of the runtime when you want to have graphical applications working with Singularity. And that's why I designed this exercise in the second session with highlighting those issues, because they are the ones that can really prevent you from having a working setup for those applications. So as I showed you, it's about user and password, directories to bind mount, very often, as you saw, fake homes to bind mount so that you have a pretend home where the container can write. As you saw in my machine, also X11 issues. So there is several ways where things can break. Another one that happened to me often is that sometimes after a while being logged in a machine, the X11 environment will get spoiled somehow, and so you have to log out and log in back to that machine, which is why I did it a couple of times during the demo. And another comment on that is that I found much easier to set up graphical applications with Singularity compared to Docker. And I think I put that in one of the comments in the discussion board. And that's actually because of it, that's by design in a way. So Docker was targeting IT people, and IT people use Docker to deploy services, web pages and stuff. And these services need to be isolated from each other for security and other purposes. So by default, when you run a container with Docker, everything is separated between the container and the host. On the other hand, Singularity was developed for HPC, so for us, for scientific computing. And so by default, a lot of things are shared between the host and the container. And as a result, the specific task of running, for instance, X11 applications is much simpler, because a number of things that in Docker you need to manually pass from the host to the container, with Singularity are already configured properly. And so the only thing you're left with doing is that X authority binding, and that's it. So that was part of my experience with Docker. I got it working with Docker, but it was kind of a nightmare to identify the right setup. Oh, and before I forget, just showing one little tip with X11 as well. We're still with X11. So I showed you that you need to bind the X authority files. So I hope you all see my browser. In some cases, so that depends on the server you're connecting to, where you're running the application from the container from. There might be cases where you get a message that file doesn't exist. And that's because in some cloud setup, the X authority is not a file in your home. It's somewhere else, and then that server would provide you with a $X authority variable, which contains the location of that file, of that authority cookie. And then this implies that all you need to do, if this -b tilde X authority doesn't work, is just to replace the tilde X authority with the dollar X authority all in capitals. And that's for when, and that depends just on the settings of your remote point of connection. But with those couple of tricks, I was able to run this type of applications from a number of locations. Other comments on containerizing pipelines or running graphical applications with containers?
What we might do too, if you're having continued issues, please sign on a little bit early and we will open up the session earlier to try to troubleshoot.
I mean tomorrow.
Yeah,
tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, afternoon, whatever
Yes.
your time.
Yes.
So yes, do sign on a little bit early. We'll try to get that done. And the materials will be there if you want to have a review, have a think, and then come with any questions tomorrow morning as well. But with that, if there are no further questions, we'll hand it over to you, Christina.
I have a quick question before handover. It might seem naive. So,
All right.
It's Nikki. If you run a container in a machine, it's I suppose constrained to the number of cores on the machine you have. So can you run on a big machine, right? So if we have like a 64 core machine that we spin up in Amazon, does the container know that?
Yeah, I think by default.
Utilized?
Yeah, by default, the containers will pick the number of cores that are available in that host. Yeah. There is also, I mean, Singularity has been designed for HPC. So if this doesn't happen often in bioinformatics, but if you're running an MPI-enabled applications, you can even spawn a Singularity with MPI run or whatever resource manager you have in your server, and you will be able to run an MPI application using even multiple nodes eventually. And that's in. I didn't cover that extensively in these days because there are many MPI applications right now in the world we are in these days. But in the materials from my webinars, there is an example about that as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've made it. So thank you so much for taking this journey with us. We always find it very valuable to get your feedback, particularly the case when we've done something new like we have today. So we'd really appreciate if you would fill in the survey. So it's at tinyurl.com/survey-container1. It will only take you a few minutes and it would be really helpful. Thanks.